Welcome back, Maestro Gang. You know what it is. Part 3 of the tuning session with Eurodyne Maestro 7. If you haven't, don't forget to check out part 1 and 2 of tuning with Eurodyne Maestro, because if you're watching this series for the first time, you'll end up like... Anyways, quick recap. We started off with creating our custom file using the base files from Eurodyne. Then we flashed the file to the Jetta and began the road tuning process using a two-phase method. At the end, we gathered enough info to see where exactly our fuel trims are, found the fault code, and also got data logs all from phase 1. So today we're going to break down everything in the data logs because it is important to have an idea on what it contains, and also use the data logs to modify the Maestro file. After that, we'll move on to phase 2 where we will do some high performance data logging to improve the daily race car. So the first thing we need to do is know where exactly our data logs are saved. Right now I'm going to create a shortcut on the desktop to the folder location. Most cases when you install the program, it creates a default folder which will be located in your computer's main hard drive. Open up the main hard drive and you'll see a folder labeled Eurodyne. So in that folder you'll see your logs. It'll be labeled according to the date and time you started the log. That way you'll be able to track exactly when you did them. The data logs file is saved as a CSV file, which is best viewed in any spreadsheet type of program. I got Microsoft Excel. If you don't have any spreadsheet program, Eurodyne does give you a data log viewer, which is our third program that we installed from the beginning. But before we even check it out with Excel, let's go ahead and start with the log viewer from Eurodyne. Depending on your computer, you might get this error that prevents it from starting. From what I experienced, this program doesn't like Windows 10 OS. So to fix this issue, all you gotta do is set the program's compatibility to something other than Windows 10, which can be found in the program properties. Once you get it open, you'll see an empty graph on your screen. To get started, hit File and click on the option to load log file. It'll automatically open the Eurodyne logs folder, and from there you can select a data log of your choice. In my case, I will be selecting a sample taken from phase 1 for efficiency testing of the Jetta. Now all you gotta do is click the play button and your data log that you recorded will play back all the measuring block values. You'll see the graph moving and the table of values on the right changing as if it were live. Pretty sick, right?
Wow!
If we click this top button of selected variables, you'll see all the measuring blocks that are being viewed. You can change this according to what you want to see by selecting and deselecting each variable. For example, if I wanted to check out how my air-fuel ratios are doing, I'd first hit the button next to the variables to clear all selections, and then select any related blocks. Hit play to let the graph build up. Click and drag a specific area to get a closer look and view what is happening. Looking at the graph, there are lines that can be distinguished using this graph key up top. As you can see, the lines look closely matched, so in reference to the air-fuel ratio, we can see our sensors are doing a good job with adjusting the actual air-fuel ratio to match the desired air-fuel ratio. Another way to view your data logs is through a spreadsheet program like I mentioned before. From there you can view every single detail of the variables, which can be used as an advantage over the log viewer. I won't be going into full detail just yet, but keep it in mind when we move on to phase 2 of data logging. Moving on, we're going to use our data log to modify our base file in Maestro. To do so, load up your custom base file that you use to flash your car. Once you got that loaded, go back to the same file menu and go down to Load Log Data. Select your phase 1 normal driving log. Now we're going to head into the category for fueling and then select the map for main fuel correction. A window will pop up displaying a table with a 3D graph of that table. In this window, take a look among this top section and you'll see a bunch of icons. You want to select the third icon to display data log. It will bring up a familiar window, which is the Eurodyne logger. Same idea with the log viewer with the play button, the variables, and the graph representation. But the feature that we're going to use is in this corner called Trace Histogram. This feature basically compares your car's log data that you gathered to the map's original data. You can use the differences to adjust the map to your specific car. Very cool feature that you can use to your advantage to make your tune more unique. If we play the data log and click to show tracing histogram, a table will pop up and show a live view of the values the ECO went through during the logging process. You'll see positive and negative numbers saying that there was a difference, and if it remains at 0, it indicates no difference between the original map and ECU map. You can see the tables at the same time, and the ones that do have a change will be highlighted on the original map. Anyways, you're going to want to hit this drop down menu to change the histogram type and select average. The histogram will now display an average value among the many different values it went through instead of just the last previous known value. From here, you're going to want to let the data log play all the way through to the end so that it fills out the table. Since this is a sample log, not much of the table is filled. That's why it is important to cover as much of the driving conditions as possible. As you can see from these tables, the RPM range goes from 1000 to a little over 6000, and the percent of load goes from 5 to over 180. Realistically, it's almost impossible to cover every single block on this table. Some of us got a heavy foot, some of us are just light-footed, so generally you want to cover your specific driving habits on how you drive your car. So once you feel you got a very complex log and hit a lot of these blocks on the table, you're going to want to hit Apply Histogram Values. This button will then change your map accordingly by subtracting, adding, or keeping values the same. Last step you want to do is to smooth out your new data to get rid of the major transitions in the map. To do this, close out your histogram and highlight a section of the new values that were applied. Right click and select the option Math Functions. A separate window will open where you can perform multiple functions to the values. All we're going to do is hit the Smooth Data button, and it will give our map a nice little touch up to the big spikes and dips in our graph. Save your new file and you can reflash your ECU. Once you do that, phase 1 is pretty much done and you can move on to phase 2. Just a quick tip, phase 1 can be completed multiple times to achieve the best possible results in terms of your fuel trims. Perform the same steps from the beginning. Record a complex log, view your fuel trims, run the histogram to change any values, save your new file and flash it to the car. Keep in mind that your fuel trims may not be perfected to reach 0%. Try to get it within that 10% rule and you're golden. Alright guys, time to move on to phase 2, high performance. The main idea for this session is to see how your car is performing when in a wide open throttle application. So yes, you will have to beat on your car to expose its weaknesses, and yes, at this phase, your car can explode and turn into a massive paperweight. But the great thing is, you'll be able to modify your maps and make all sorts of changes to improve these weaknesses. In the end, you want your car to perform its best while achieving the most power. Safely, of course. Just like in phase 1, we will be working with Eurodyne Logger. Make sure your car is up to operating temperature, turn off your air conditioning and traction control. Once you got that all set, you're going to want to perform a 3rd or 4th gear wide open throttle log between 1500 to 7000 RPM. All you got to do is get into 3rd or 4th gear and mash that pedal and hold it there until you reach 7000 RPM. You can do multiple wide open throttle runs to gather as much data as possible. So once you get your logs done, instead of opening it up with Eurodyne Log Viewer, use your spreadsheet program instead. The reason why we are using a separate program for this phase is because it will display every detail of your measuring blocks. Some of these details can be easily overlooked in the log viewer, and also when it comes to the high performance tuning, you want to see every little thing. Once opened, you may not be able to see every category at the top, so what you do is hover on the end of each column and double click so that it adjusts automatically. Now that we can see everything, find the exact point where your wide open throttle run starts and where it ends. Once you find that portion of the data, you can delete the irrelevant data to simplify it. Now there are a ton of factors that we can look at to see what can be improved, but I'll just go over a few. In my opinion, the biggest performance killer is engine knock. Without going into too much detail on what that is, one thing you do need to know is that when knock occurs within any cylinder, the ECU will react by something called ignition angle retard or timing pull. This timing pull occurs to reduce the amount of engine knock in order to prevent major damage. The result of this is power loss. So the first thing I hunt down within my data logs is any occurrence of timing pull. I'll start with focusing on these 4 columns that indicate knock within the 4 cylinders. You'll see values that indicates the degrees of ignition retard that is occurring. From here, I'll scroll down and look for any values that is not 0, which is 0 timing pulled. As I scroll down, we go higher up in the RPM range, and here we have a portion of timing pull that is occurring at around 5500 RPM. The severity of the knock is assumed by the amount of degrees being pulled. The closer to 0, the less severe. So in my case, I'm seeing a consistent 1.5 degrees of ignition retard. Not too severe, but of course we want the most power and best performance, so generally you would want to reduce or eliminate the knock. Now, because of the nature of engine knock, there are a bunch of causes and solutions. For example, the cause of this timing pull could be the engine running too hot. Using different measuring blocks, we can sort of point in the direction of how to solve the issue. Intake temperature is a possible culprit. As I scroll down, looking at the knock and intake temperature column, I notice that around a certain intake temperature, around 39 degrees, the timing pull starts with 1.5 degrees of retard and it continues to worsen as the intake temp rises. So if that is the case, I could say, hey, the intake temperature needs to be cooler to reduce the knock. I could get a bigger intercooler or anything to reduce that temperature, therefore reduce timing pull. Another possible cause is the wide open throttle air-fuel mixture. Your air-fuel ratio is the most crucial part to performance and durability of the engine. Without going into too much detail into different mixtures, just keep in mind the differences of lean and rich. There are tons of debates on what air-fuel mixture will give you the most power. I can't suggest a certain mixture, but I can tell you that you just want the mixture that keeps your engine happy, meaning the lowest amount of knock. As an example, let's assume that the air-fuel ratio is too lean for my engine, therefore causing the issue for the timing being pulled in the upper rev range. We can actually solve this issue by adjusting one of the fuel maps in Eurodyne Maestro. Open up your most recently flashed Maestro file, and in the category fueling, we're going to open up the map for power enrichment. Usually this would be the map you would adjust your air-fuel ratios when dealing with a wide open throttle application. For the axis, we have RPM versus torque demand. The values within the table represents the target lambda. To convert lambda to an estimated air-fuel ratio, what you can do is get a calculator, take one of these lambda values and multiply it by 14.7, which is the stoichiometric air-fuel ratio. And now you have a new value. Without rounding, you have an estimated air-fuel ratio. Doing so, I'll be able to determine differences between lean and rich. Now if you noticed on the graph, we have some stoic ratios, and then this portion, if we do the conversion, it is all rich air-fuel ratios. This is the portion that we can assume that is for the wide open throttle applications, which pretty much makes sense since the torque demand is very high, so this is the section we will adjust. So I have my wide open throttle log to use as a reference to this map. I have it open to where the timing pull is just about to start. And if we look at the target air-fuel ratio, you can see that it starts to lean out as we go higher in the RPM. Now if I go to the map, we can see there's a transition that's causing it to lean out. If I convert the values, we get 11.94 and 12.05 air-fuel ratio. So after 5000 RPM, we should see the air-fuel ratio transitioning from 11.94 to 12.05. In our log, we can confirm this right here. 11.94 below 5000 RPM, and as we go higher, the transition to 12.05 begins. So during this time, the airfield ratio is leaning out, and look what happens at the same time. We have the timing pull. And as we go higher in the RPM, it starts to get worse until eventually everything gets all out of whack and the engine begins to protect itself.
Bruh.
So in theory, if I were to richen this airfield ratio from 12.05 back to 11.94, I should be able to reduce knock and reduce timing pull, since everything before that basically had zero timing pull. After you make adjustments, save your file, flash your car, and repeat phase 2 over until you achieve no timing pull. Alright, that's a wrap for this session, guys. It's a lot to process, but believe me, there is a ton of more things to do for tuning. I haven't even hit all the points yet, we just scratched the surface, but no worries, I'll try to cover more of tuning later on. Hope y'all ain't brain dead by now. Leave a like, leave a comment, share and subscribe. Mahalo guys for watching. Maestro gang, I'm out of here. See y'all on the next one.